Today I'm kicking off my attempts at having 100 babies in The Sims 4 in just 100 days by any unhinged means necessary. And because me from the past didn't think that would be hard enough, I'm also starting semi-rags to riches style, so let's get into it. Day 1 started with creating our sim, whose womb will be carrying us through a good amount of this challenge. CC Honeypot, named so because she is dripping in custom content, at least by my frigid standards, and the fact that she will be repeatedly honeypotting men to get what she wants, aka lots of babies. She has the romantic, family-orientated, and erratic traits because I feel like you'd probably have to take on a mission like this. Getting out of cast, we're starting off on the mid-nowhere lot on the island in Windenburg. Aside from a tent, pea bush, cooler, and fire pit, I'm going at this challenge rags to riches style, so with absolutely zero simoleons. Again, because I apparently hate myself, I'm starting with a few extra stipulations, including starting with the cottage living lot trait and not being able to sell any items through the inventory. If you want to hear about some other fun ways to make a rags to riches challenge harder in The Sims 4, check out this video listed in the cards and down below. Getting started on the money situation was my first objective, so CC spent most of day 1 running around the island finding collectibles and harvesting what she could. I haven't played in this area in years, so seeing that there was so many collectible spots and places to fish in this part of the world was a great surprise, especially having recently been disappointed by the emptiness of Chestnut Ridge. I am still standing by the fact that Windenburg is the best world in the game. While we were running around, we met our first victims, neighbours, Jay Huntington III and Knox Greenberg. We did attempt a first flirt or two with Jay, but CC was rejected. So not the best start to achieving our overall mission, but luckily snapdragons were in season, so we ended our first day by starting a little garden. On day 2, we spent a lot more time scouring the island. We grabbed some more snapdragons, bluebells, and mushrooms, which had grown overnight. While we were doing this, Jay texted us to ask if he should become friends with Clara Bjergesen, however you say her name, I'm sorry, as CC is truly a toxic queen with a ton of internalized misogyny and a propensity to view all other women as competition. We told him that probably wasn't a very good idea. We expanded the garden, treated ourselves to a fish on a stick for a dinner by the fire, and then we went on a spontaneous trip to the cafe on the mainland after being invited by Jay at the unsociable time of 9:30 p.m. He once again rejected our romantic advances, so we dipped and went to bed. We arose on day 3 to another text from Jay telling us that he had in fact told Clara to do one. This was a very busy day as we started by heading to the market in Henford-on-Bagley to sell the produce we'd collected over the last few days. Again, because we aren't selling any items through the inventory, at least for now. We could then afford a shower, which was very necessary after we'd only been peeing in a bush for over 48 hours. As if he could telepathically detect the fact that the stank had evaporated from our body, Jay called and invited us to GeekCon. We went balls to the wall and started flirting, and we had finally broken down Jay's reservations and he was receptive, finally. For the TLDR, we had our first woohoo in the rocket, but the anti-gravity did us dirty or something like that, so we gave it another go in the observatory and we were pregnant. As a bonus, during one of the woohoo attempts, we got the inheritance phone call, so between this and the market earlier this morning, we went from 0 to 3,000 simoleons in one day. After telling Jay about the good news, we broke things off with him, but I don't know if that fully registered in his post-woohoo haze. Despite knowing that she had a bun in the oven, CC automatically went to buy herself a drink, so on this day, our favorite new erratic crazy wine mom was born. With our very first crotch monkey growing, making money and getting a bit of a house going had become extra urgent by day 4. We spent the day doing another sweep of the island, looking for collectibles, and then we used some of what we'd saved to buy a selling table. This meant that CC could finally shift some of the frogs and other random stuff she had kicking about in her inventory that we couldn't sell at the market in Henford-on-Bagley. Jay kept messaging us during our entrepreneurial efforts. He truly didn't register being dumped yesterday, I'm convinced. And okay, Jay might actually be obsessed with CC, as in the early hours on day 5, he just showed up to our lot and vibed by the fire with Mr. Vladdy Daddy. I got CC up quickly so we could grab a few snaps of him to keep track of our conquests, and he took this as an invitation to just climb into our tent with us after we went back to sleep. Something really may need to be done about him soon. To get away from Jay, we spent the rest of the day in Henford-on-Bagley, first selling our produce at one of the stalls, then through the market table. We treated ourselves to CC's favourite meal, bangers and mash, at the pub later that night, where some guy had the audacity to order a glass of wine in front of us. We took the liberty of relieving it from him. And oh lord, day 6 was a wild one. I spent the first half of the day expanding the garden with a bunch of new stuff that I'd bought at the market yesterday, and generally managing Susie's needs as I knew that she would pop at any minute. Lo and behold, we soon went into labor, and as this was our first, I thought it would be nice to go over to the hospital. I did not expect this, but we gave birth to 2 twin boys on our first try, who I named Stefan and Damon because my mate and I had started watching the Vampire Diaries back when I started this challenge, and they were the first names that came to mind. This is really the start of me having absolutely no naming scheme during this challenge, so sorry about that. As soon as we got back from the hospital, Jay invited us to his house, and it was at this moment that I messed up royally. I thought that the babies would be fine to vibe in the tent alone, so I went over to Jay's to take care of business because this man had seriously been overstepping our boundaries. Let's just say that I tried using the unaliving bunny interaction on Jay, and for some reason it killed Cece, and I hadn't saved since day 4. So we lost a lot of progress because of what I'm assuming now is a glitch, which is bloody fantastic. With the power of hindsight, again, I'm pretty sure this was a glitch, but for a few days, I really gaslit myself into thinking that I'd somehow accidentally clicked on Cece instead of Jay. So through the power of MC Command Center, I had to stick a plaster on the space-time continuum. Although we have popped back a few days and lost some progress, I set our household funds to roughly what I thought we had before the incident. I also set Cece's pregnancy back to her 3rd trimester, so we re-popped out Stefan and Damon again. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that Cece's aesthetic may or may not have been inspired by Bloom from Winx Club. So in this new branch of the timeline, I think Cece is feeling some strange urge to connect with some magical powers and a deep primal drive to make Jay pay. After the rebirth, I didn't really know what to do for the rest of the day, so I took a chance on inviting over Knox Greenberg, and to the dulcet tones of the baby screaming in the background, we got pregnant for round 2. Honestly, day 7 was just filled with some confusion for me because I've not done any family gameplay since before the infants update. I swear babies were so much easier to take care of before then. These babies are literally crying and pooing and needing feeding every 2 minutes. I built a room to store them in, and now that the nappies and bottles are objects that just spawn on the floor after tending to the kids, they were quite quickly existing in an actual shit shack. Days 8 and 9 were honestly much of a muchness, just a lot of trying to take care of Cece's needs and the garden, in between changing nappies and shelving bottles in mouths. Jay then felt the need to drop by again, and it made me realize how much I appreciate Knox for actually being respectful of the fact that we were just using him for his little swimmers. In the super early morning of day 10 though, we gave birth to our 3rd son, who I named Not Annoying. I don't really remember why, maybe I was trying to manifest an easier child to take care of after the first twins. After getting some sleep and tending to the babies in the morning, it was time to start enacting our new grand plan that had been brewing since the fracturing of the timeline. Basically, Bloom is off to Althea to become a spellcaster. We gathered the magical orb things and officially entered our witchy era, which we'll be dipping in and out of throughout the rest of this challenge. Day 11 was really a lot of speed through baby caring and gardening, and I realized that I really should be focusing on getting some satisfaction points to eventually get the fertile reward trait, so I started working on the gardening aspiration. That evening, the twins aged up into infants, which again, I really have a lot to learn in terms of managing their needs efficiently. On the morning of day 12, the fact that taking care of infants can be kind of annoying really dawned on me, so Cece ran off to Henford to sell our produce at the market. The Sims 3 really spoiled us by letting us type in values in the selling menus, didn't it? I had to spam click like 200 times to sell everything that we had. When we got back, I spent the cash we'd made on a little house upgrade so the infants and newborns could be split up, as one crying would wake up the other. But there wasn't a ton of benefits to this just now, as Not Annoying also aged up into an infant. Cece was seriously suffering just constantly on the energy front, so I rewarded her hard work with a new bed to collapse into. By day 13, trying to find the balance between taking care of the kids, managing Cece's needs, and looking after the garden was getting even tougher with 3 infants now, but we still found some time to invite over our next project, the neighbor Sergio, to start building some friendship with him. This really set the groundwork for day 14, which was a day of 2 parts, baby tending in the AM and baby making in the PM with Sergio, who really didn't respond well to the good news as he hates kids. We finished off the day by making some much needed cash via the selling table. By day 15, I think I'd got into a bit of a toxic cycle of frustration with the infants after not annoying automatically aged up a little earlier than expected. So today I made the executive decision to age up the twins into toddlers. It's here that I should probably specify that while I'm trying to have 100 babies, I'm not following the exact 100 baby challenge rules. I'm mostly avoiding using the same baby daddy multiple times, and this is one of the only times that I age up children before the "it's their birthday" notification. But I'll expand more on what rules I'm flouting more actively in a later episode. But anyway, aging up the twins meant that I had to spend almost every penny we had on expanding the house to fit in some toddler beds. Thank God these guys can be so much more self-sufficient now. Later that day, Jay invited us to the Spice Festival, and for once we didn't just red button him. I went over there hoping that a dragon fruit might be growing, but unfortunately we had no such luck. On day 16, the Water Conservation Neighborhood Action Plan took our last 60 simoleons, dropping us back down to 0. Not annoying aged up into a toddler and lived up to his name for the very first time by automatically gaining the independent trait. Other than that, it was another day of child tending and gardening. The next day was the first day of summer, and here I decided to change my lifespan settings to short so we could get through the cycle of raising kids a little bit quicker. But doing this seemed to mess up the space-time continuum even more, as Not Annoying was now the oldest kid. I guess that's canon now. By this point, where we had gotten a little more established and the garden was growing, I was getting really tired of having to click 1,000 times at the market while selling our produce. So I officially dropped the rule of not being able to sell via the inventory. Today was also the start of an unofficial drinking game I've been playing with myself during the challenge, as I believe this was the first time I caught Cece accidentally peeing on one of her babies. In a pocket of spare time, Cece practiced some magic and I learned a spell which I was really hoping for, Inferniate. This is going to be essential for the grand plans going forward. Later that day, we went into labor and not only had our first girl, but also the second. I named them Princess and Princess 2/Princess Squared. I'll probably call her both things going forward. So on day 18, the house was truly embodying its energy in both an aesthetic and literal sense, being filled with tons of dirty nappies constantly. I had to do a little bit of renovating because all the kids aged up, and now having kids in the house, I was reminded of how annoying the monster under the bed can be. So later on, I doubled up on tents because they can help you circumvent that. You can't have monsters under your bed if you don't have a real bed, I guess. The house got a little bit quieter on day 19 as the kids went to school for the first time. I thought that no harm could really come from leaving the princesses to fend for themselves for a few hours, so we headed to the market in Henford-on-Bagley. With snapdragons out of season now, morel mushrooms were now our biggest moneymaker. We sold a good amount of them here, but we were still a little tight on cash. Despite having bills to pay and only one toilet between 6 Sims, Cece made the incredibly smart and responsible financial decision to invest in a dragon fruit so we could hopefully start supercharging our income. We got home, planted it inside, then invited Paolo Roca over, who we'd met a while ago, and we got pregnant again. By this point, I was running into a lot more glitches. Princess Squared wouldn't go through any eating animations, so I had to do a one-off need cheat to make sure she didn't get taken away, and none of the kids were given homework books after school for some reason. And on day 20, Stefan was apparently so sick that the game forced him to stay home from school, so I forced him to spend most of his day outside fishing. And the glitches struck again as our morel plants had reset, so we didn't have anything to harvest that morning. The rest of this day was basically chaos between the annoying water conservation, nap, and the babies generally being incapable of taking care of themselves. This was probably best encapsulated by the fact that we ended the day by once again peeing on and then curb stomping one of the babies. And on that joyous note is where the first episode of this series is going to draw to a close. I know it may not seem like we're going to hit the 100 babies in 100 days time frame just yet, but don't worry, I have some plans up my sleeve. But if you have any ideas on how I can get a little more efficient with making progress, or also names for babies, do let me know down below. Otherwise, the next part will be up on the channel soon. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.